Dr. William Mercer.
Have you ever gone to bed feeling like you did everything right? Skipped dessert, took a short walk after dinner, maybe even avoided late-night snacks, only to wake up and see your fasting blood sugar higher than you expected? If you're over 50, that moment can feel deeply frustrating. Many people assume the problem started with breakfast, but in reality, fasting blood sugar often has very little to do with what happens in the morning. It may actually begin the night before, and one of the most overlooked reasons isn't simply eating too much sugar. It's how quickly your body processes the carbohydrates you do eat, and how hard your pancreas has to work to keep up. Today, I want to share a surprisingly simple habit that takes about 30 seconds. It doesn't involve expensive supplements, complicated diets, or extreme fasting plans. Instead, it centers around one humble kitchen ingredient that has been used in traditional cooking for centuries and has attracted growing scientific interest because of one remarkable natural fiber: fenugreek. More specifically, the Galactomannan fiber found inside fenugreek seeds. Now, before we go any further, let me be clear. Fenugreek is not a cure for diabetes. It should never replace medications prescribed by your healthcare professional. But for some people, especially those struggling with elevated fasting blood sugar or insulin resistance, it may become one small piece of a much larger strategy. And the reason has everything to do with what happens inside your digestive system long before sugar ever reaches your bloodstream. Most people picture blood sugar as something that rises only after eating sweets, but your body doesn't think that way. Bread, rice, potatoes, pasta, even foods that don't taste particularly sweet are eventually broken down into glucose. The question isn't only what you eat, it's how quickly your body is forced to deal with it. Imagine you're trying to fill a bathtub. If you open the faucet all the way, the water rushes in faster than the drain can remove it. The tub begins to overflow. Now imagine turning the faucet down just enough. The same amount of water eventually enters the tub, but because it arrives more slowly, everything stays under control. That's remarkably similar to what happens with glucose. When carbohydrates are digested very quickly, large amounts of glucose enter the bloodstream over a short period of time. Your pancreas immediately notices. Its job is to release insulin, the hormone that helps move glucose from your blood into your cells. Most of the time, the pancreas performs this task beautifully, but after years of repeated sugar spikes, aging, inactivity, poor sleep, chronic stress, or insulin resistance, the pancreas may find itself working harder and harder just to achieve the same result. Think of it like asking the same worker to unload trucks that keep arriving faster every year. Eventually, the workload becomes exhausting, and that's where fenugreek begins to tell an interesting story. Not because it magically lowers blood sugar, but because it may change the speed of the traffic entering the system in the first place. Inside fenugreek seeds is a soluble fiber called galactomannan. Unlike fibers that simply pass through the digestive tract, galactomannan behaves almost like a soft sponge when mixed with water. It thickens. It forms a gentle, gel-like texture inside the stomach and small intestine. That simple physical change has surprisingly important consequences. Instead of carbohydrates rushing rapidly toward digestion, they move more slowly. Enzymes responsible for breaking down starches take longer to reach their targets. Glucose enters the bloodstream at a more gradual pace. Notice the difference. We're not necessarily talking about eating less carbohydrate. We're talking about changing the speed at which your body experiences it. For many people, that's an important distinction, because when glucose rises more gradually, the pancreas doesn't always need to produce such an abrupt burst of insulin. It's more like asking that worker to unload one truck at a time instead of 5 arriving simultaneously. Scientists often describe this as reducing the glycemic impact of a meal, but in plain English, you can think of it as making the body's job calmer instead of chaotic. Now here's where many people become surprised. The real goal isn't chasing the lowest blood sugar immediately after eating. It's reducing the roller coaster. Large spikes are often followed by larger crashes. Those crashes can trigger hunger, cravings, fatigue, and another cycle of overeating. Gentler rises frequently lead to steadier energy, steadier appetite, and sometimes better overnight glucose regulation as well. That's especially important because fasting blood sugar is influenced by more than dinner. During the night, your liver quietly releases glucose into your bloodstream. It's actually supposed to do that. Your brain still needs fuel while you're asleep. The problem comes when insulin resistance develops. The liver may continue releasing more glucose than necessary because it isn't responding efficiently to insulin signals. This is one reason fasting blood sugar can remain elevated even when someone barely eats breakfast. Many people blame the morning, but the real story has been unfolding all night. Now, does fenugreek completely stop this process? No, but by supporting healthier blood sugar patterns throughout the day, reducing rapid glucose surges after meals, and easing some of the demand placed on insulin production, it may contribute to better overall metabolic balance over time. That brings us to something many viewers have probably heard before. Someone says, just sprinkle fenugreek on everything. Unfortunately, that's not how the research has generally examined it. The amount matters, the form matters, and perhaps most importantly, the timing matters. We'll talk about that in just a moment, because this is where the so-called 30-second hack actually begins to make sense, and why simply adding fenugreek to a random meal may not produce the effect people expect. The phrase 30-second hack sounds almost too simple to take seriously, but sometimes the smallest habits have the greatest chance of becoming consistent, and consistency is what often matters most when it comes to metabolic health. The idea is straightforward. Before a meal that contains carbohydrates, some people mix a small amount of fenugreek powder into water, stir it well, and drink it promptly before it thickens too much. Others prefer to soak whole fenugreek seeds in water ahead of time and consume the softened seeds with the liquid before eating. The preparation itself takes only seconds. The reason for taking it before the meal is simple. Galactomannan needs to be present in the digestive tract as the carbohydrates begin arriving. If you wait until after you've finished eating, much of that opportunity has already passed. Think back to our bathtub analogy. You wouldn't wait until the tub is overflowing before turning down the faucet. You slow the flow before the water rushes in. That's exactly the role this soluble fiber may play. As it absorbs water, it creates a thicker environment inside the stomach. Food tends to leave the stomach a little more gradually, and carbohydrates may be broken down and absorbed at a slower pace. To your digestive system, that difference can be meaningful. To your pancreas, it may mean a less demanding workload. Now here's something that often surprises my patients. Many expect fenugreek to work like a medication that forces blood sugar downward. That's not how it appears to work. Its primary effect is much more mechanical than dramatic. Imagine dropping dry rice through a wide funnel. Everything falls quickly. Now imagine placing a fine mesh across that funnel. The same rice still passes through, but at a slower, steadier rate. Galactomannan behaves in a somewhat similar way inside the digestive tract. Instead of glucose arriving all at once, it may enter the bloodstream more gradually. That slower arrival gives insulin a better chance to keep up. Researchers have also explored another fascinating possibility. Some evidence suggests that compounds naturally present in fenugreek may gently support the pancreas in releasing insulin when it's needed, although this area is still being actively studied. The effect appears modest rather than dramatic, and scientists continue to investigate exactly how these compounds interact with insulin-producing cells. This is important because sensational headlines often exaggerate these findings. You'll sometimes hear claims that fenugreek repairs the pancreas. Current evidence simply doesn't support that statement. The pancreas is an incredibly complex organ. No single food restores years of metabolic wear and tear. What nutrition can do, however, is create an environment that makes the body's existing systems work more efficiently. And that distinction matters, because when people expect miracles, they're often disappointed. When they understand physiology, they're empowered. Let's make this practical with a story. I once spoke with a gentleman in his early 70s. Let's call him Robert. Robert had faithfully checked his fasting blood sugar every morning for months. No matter what he tried, the number barely moved. He became convinced his meter was broken. But after reviewing his routine, something stood out. Dinner was usually a large bowl of white rice with very little protein and almost no fiber. There was nothing inherently bad about the meal. The problem was the speed. Everything in that meal was absorbed quickly. Working with his healthcare team, Robert made several small adjustments instead of one dramatic change. He reduced the portion of refined starch. He added grilled fish or beans for protein. He included vegetables at every dinner. And, after discussing it with his clinician to make sure it was appropriate alongside his medications, he began using fenugreek before some carbohydrate-heavy meals. Nothing changed overnight. That's another lesson worth remembering. Healthy metabolism rarely responds to overnight promises, but over the following weeks, his post-meal readings became less erratic. His morning numbers slowly became more predictable. Perhaps just as importantly, he noticed he wasn't as hungry late in the evening. That last observation deserves more attention than it usually receives. One of the remarkable characteristics of soluble fiber is its ability to increase fullness. Because it absorbs water and forms a gel, food remains in the stomach a bit longer. Many people naturally feel satisfied sooner and stay satisfied longer. This isn't about willpower, it's about biology. When you're genuinely less hungry, resisting unnecessary snacks becomes much easier. And those late evening snacks, especially sugary or refined carbohydrate foods, often have an outsized effect on overnight glucose control. Here's where another common myth deserves to be challenged. Some people believe that if a little fiber is good, then a huge amount must be even better. Unfortunately, the digestive system doesn't always agree. Large amounts of fenugreek introduced suddenly can cause bloating, gas, abdominal discomfort, or loose stools. That's why healthcare professionals often recommend introducing higher fiber foods gradually while increasing water intake. Your digestive system appreciates gentle changes far more than sudden extremes. There's another important consideration for anyone watching this video. Fenugreek may lower blood sugar. That sounds positive, and it often is. But if you're already taking diabetes medications or insulin, combining them without medical guidance could increase the risk of blood sugar dropping too low. That's why conversations with your healthcare professional are so important. Natural does not automatically mean risk-free. The same plant that may help one person could require medication adjustments in another. And that's especially true if you're taking medications such as sulfonylureas or insulin. Now let's broaden the picture. Fenugreek works best when it joins a team. Imagine trying to row a boat with only one oar. You'll move, but mostly in circles. Blood sugar management works the same way. Fenugreek is one oar. The others include regular movement, adequate sleep, balanced meals with sufficient protein, stress management, maintaining a healthy weight when appropriate, and following the treatment plan developed with your healthcare provider. When all those oars move together, progress becomes much smoother. There's also another fascinating phenomenon scientists sometimes call the second meal effect. In simple terms, the way your body responds to one meal can influence how it handles the next meal several hours later. When earlier meals produce gentler glucose and insulin responses, later meals sometimes do as well. It's almost as though your metabolism carries a memory of what happened before. That's one reason consistent daily habits often outperform occasional heroic efforts. People sometimes ask me, Dr. Mercer, what's the single best food for blood sugar? I always answer the same way. There isn't one. There are patterns. Patterns repeated over hundreds of meals become the biology we eventually measure in the doctor's office. And that's actually encouraging, because patterns can change. If you followed along this far, you may be thinking, this all sounds reasonable, but what should I actually do tomorrow? That's exactly the right question, because knowledge only becomes valuable when it turns into action. Let's walk through a simple, practical routine that many older adults can discuss with their healthcare professional. Imagine tomorrow's lunch includes grilled chicken, brown rice, and steamed vegetables. A balanced meal already gives your body several advantages. The protein helps support muscle and slows digestion. The vegetables add fiber, vitamins, and minerals. The rice provides energy, but it's also the main source of carbohydrates. About 10 to 15 minutes before eating, you prepare your fenugreek. It takes less than 30 seconds. You mix a modest amount of fenugreek powder into a glass of water, stir it, and drink it before it thickens too much. If you prefer soaked whole seeds, you prepare them ahead of time and consume them with the soaking water before the meal. Then you simply eat. No complicated calculations, no expensive gadgets, no dramatic detox. Just one small habit added to an already balanced meal. Notice what didn't happen. You didn't skip carbohydrates entirely. Carbohydrates are not the enemy. In fact, healthy carbohydrate-rich foods like beans, oats, lentils, vegetables, and many fruits provide important nutrients and fiber that support overall health. The goal isn't to fear carbohydrates. The goal is to help your body handle them more smoothly. That's an important mindset shift, especially for adults over 50. As we age, our bodies naturally become a little less sensitive to insulin. Muscle mass gradually declines if we don't actively maintain it. Physical activity often decreases after retirement. Sleep may become lighter or more interrupted. All of these changes can influence fasting blood sugar. That means success rarely comes from one magic ingredient. It comes from several small habits working together. Let's put those habits into perspective. First, prioritize protein with each meal. Protein slows digestion, supports healthy muscles, and can help reduce large swings in blood sugar. Whether it's fish, eggs, Greek yogurt, beans, tofu, or lean poultry, including a good protein source is one of the simplest ways to improve the balance of a meal. Second, don't underestimate vegetables. They're far more than a side dish. Their fiber works alongside foods like fenugreek to slow digestion naturally while providing nutrients that support heart health, digestive health, and healthy aging. Third, move after meals whenever it's safe for you. You don't need to run a marathon. Even a gentle 10 to 20-minute walk after eating encourages your muscles to use glucose for energy. Think of your muscles as a storage space that welcomes some of the glucose circulating in your bloodstream. Many people are surprised by how powerful this simple habit can be when repeated consistently. Fourth, pay attention to your evening routine. Late-night snacking, especially on sweets or refined carbohydrates, can make overnight glucose regulation more challenging. Sometimes the most effective change isn't adding something. It's deciding that the kitchen is closed after dinner, unless there's a genuine medical reason to eat. Now, I'd like to mention something that often gets overlooked in conversations about fasting blood sugar: sleep. During deep, restorative sleep, your body performs an incredible amount of maintenance. Hormones are balanced, cells repair themselves, the brain clears metabolic waste. When sleep becomes fragmented or consistently too short, hormones involved in blood sugar regulation, including cortisol, can become disrupted. Cortisol is sometimes called the stress hormone. One of its jobs is to help raise blood sugar when your body believes it needs extra energy. If cortisol remains elevated because of poor sleep, chronic stress, or illness, fasting glucose may rise even when your diet is relatively healthy. That's why managing blood sugar isn't just about what's on your plate. It's also about what happens after you turn off the lights. Here's another point that deserves careful attention. Not everyone should use fenugreek. People who take blood-thinning medications, certain diabetes medications, or who have allergies to plants in the legume family should speak with their healthcare professional before adding it to their routine. Fenugreek may also interact with some medications or increase the risk of low blood sugar when combined with glucose-lowering treatments. This isn't meant to discourage you. It's meant to remind you that safe healthcare is personalized healthcare. Your neighbor's experience is not your medical history. Your friend's success is not automatically your prescription. That's why informed conversations with your clinician are so valuable. The most successful patients I've known over the years weren't the ones constantly chasing the newest health trend. They were the ones who embraced simple habits they could sustain for years. They learned to think less about perfection and more about consistency. One balanced meal doesn't transform your metabolism. Neither does one unhealthy meal destroy it. Your body is constantly responding to the overall pattern of your choices. That's wonderful news, because every meal is another opportunity to support your health. Every walk is another opportunity to help your muscles use glucose. Every good night's sleep is another opportunity to restore the systems that quietly keep you alive. And every thoughtful conversation with your healthcare professional is another opportunity to tailor those habits to your unique needs. So, where does our humble fenugreek seed fit into all of this? Not as a miracle, not as a replacement for medication, not as a shortcut, but as one evidence-informed tool that may help slow carbohydrate absorption through its galactomannan fiber, may reduce the sharpness of post-meal glucose rises, and may modestly support the body's natural insulin response when combined with an overall healthy lifestyle. Sometimes that's exactly what meaningful progress looks like. Not dramatic, not flashy, just steady improvements that accumulate over months and years. If today's discussion has given you a new way of thinking about fasting blood sugar, I'd love to hear from you. How old are you? And what has been the biggest challenge in managing your blood sugar? Your experience may encourage someone else who is quietly facing the same struggle. And if you found this helpful, consider sharing it with a friend or family member who checks their morning blood sugar and wonders why the numbers don't seem to make sense. Because sometimes understanding the why is the first step toward changing the outcome. Until next time, remember this: your body is working for you every single day, even when it doesn't feel perfect. Small, consistent choices give it the best chance to do that job well. Stay sharp.